Have you ever sat at your kitchen table with a hot cup of coffee in your hands, staring out the window, wondering what went wrong? You raised your child with all the love you had, made sacrifices that only a parent could understand, and now, after all those years, you're met with silence, cold replies, or worse, disrespect. It's like one day you were the most important person in their world, and the next, you barely exist. If this hits home, you're not alone. So many parents feel the exact same way but rarely say it out loud. It feels too painful, too shameful even, like a quiet heartbreak that no one can see. But I want you to know this. Just because your child may be acting ungrateful or dismissive doesn't mean you failed. And it certainly doesn't mean you have to stay stuck in that hurt. Let's have a real conversation about this. A conversation that doesn't blame you or them, but instead helps you take your power back, without losing your heart along the way. Now, let me start by saying something important. Love doesn't vanish just because someone grows up, but the way people express it can change, sometimes drastically. As children become adults, their worlds expand. Their focus shifts to careers, families of their own, struggles you may never hear about. But when that shift turns into neglect or disrespect, it becomes more than just growing pains. It becomes something you shouldn't have to accept in silence. So what can you do when your child seems ungrateful or treats you with disrespect? The first thing, maybe the hardest thing, is this. Don't take it as a reflection of your worth. That may sound simple, but it isn't. Especially when the person you love the most acts like you don't matter. It cuts deep. But here's the truth. Your value does not begin or end with how your child treats you. It is not measured by how often they call, what they say, or whether they remember your birthday. You were someone before you became a parent, and you still are. Your kindness, your experience, your strength, none of that disappears because someone fails to acknowledge it. In fact, this is where you begin to gently shift your perspective. Instead of asking, "Why don't they value me?" try asking, "Have I forgotten how to value myself outside of being their parent?" See, many of us, especially those who grew up in a generation that taught us parenting means sacrifice, start to blur the lines between love and self-abandonment. We pour everything we have into our children, our time, our money, our health, sometimes even our dreams. And we do it gladly because that's what love looks like to us. But here's a difficult truth. The more you give without boundaries, the more invisible you can become. Not because you're not important, but because you've taught others, often unknowingly, that you will always be there no matter what. You've made yourself the safety net, the giver, the fixer. And over time, that role can swallow up who you are as a person. So what can you do now? The answer isn't to stop loving your child. The answer is to start loving yourself with the same depth and care. That begins with setting boundaries. Not walls, but boundaries. A wall says, "Stay out." A boundary says, "Here's how I deserve to be treated." If your child speaks to you in a harsh tone, it's okay to say calmly and clearly, "I won't continue this conversation if I'm being spoken to like this." You're not being rude. You're modeling respect. You're showing them, and yourself, that your time, your energy, and your peace matter. And here's something beautiful that happens when you do that. The relationship starts to rebalance. Maybe not overnight, maybe not even this year. But when you stop accepting disrespect as normal, you invite change. You teach your child how to treat you, not through lectures or guilt, but through action. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. If I speak up or set limits, won't I push them further away? And I hear that fear. Truly, I do. But let me ask you this. If someone only stays connected to you because you don't challenge their behavior, Is that really connection? Or is it quiet resentment building beneath the surface? You deserve more than that. You deserve real, respectful love. And real love includes honesty. Another powerful shift happens when you reclaim parts of yourself that got buried under years of parenting. What did you enjoy before your life revolved around being a parent? Was it painting, gardening, writing, traveling, talking with friends? Somewhere along the line, many of us forget those parts. We become so focused on nurturing others that we forget how to nurture ourselves. But those parts of you still exist. They're waiting to be invited back. And the more you re-engage with your own passions and joys, the less your emotional world depends on how your child responds to you. This is where your dignity begins to shine again. Not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you remember that your life is still yours. And let's not forget this simple truth. Children, even adult ones, pay more attention to what we model than what we say. If you constantly give without limit, they learn that's just how things work. If you tolerate disrespect quietly, they assume it's acceptable. But when you show up with calm strength, when you live your life fully, when you enforce boundaries with kindness, that speaks volumes. You don't have to demand respect. You live it. You embody it. And that is far more powerful than any words could be. Now, none of this means the pain goes away overnight. It still hurts when your child doesn't call, when they forget your birthday, or when they dismiss your feelings. That's real. That matters. But when your peace no longer hinges on their approval, something shifts inside you. You begin to heal. Not because they changed, but because you did. You begin to see that your worth was never gone. It was just waiting to be remembered. And maybe, just maybe, when your child sees that you are no longer chasing their affection, when they see that you are whole and grounded, something inside them will shift too. Sometimes the greatest act of love is showing someone how to love you better, by loving yourself first. So if today you're feeling invisible, or unappreciated, or quietly aching from the distance, know this: you are not alone, and you are not powerless. There are steps you can take, not to fix everything, but to find peace within yourself. Peace that no one can take away. You're allowed to expect respect. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to enjoy your life, even if your child doesn't see the beauty in you right now. Because you are still here. You are still whole. And you are still worthy of a life filled with dignity, love, and joy. Sometimes the most powerful moment in a parent's life doesn't come when their child says, "I love you." But when the parent finally says to themselves, "I matter," even if they don't see it. That's not bitterness. That's strength. That's healing. And that's where we begin to rebuild. You see, for many years, you probably carried around the quiet belief that if you just gave a little more time, more help, more patience, your child would come around. That one day they'd wake up and realize how much you've done for them. But here's the hard truth. Waiting for someone else to validate your love is like planting seeds and never knowing if it will rain. You can't live on hope alone. You deserve something more solid. Now, I'm not saying to stop loving your child. What I'm saying is, love with your eyes open, not at the cost of your peace. When we stop tying our self-worth to whether someone calls us back or says thank you, we begin to live again. That's not giving up. It's growing up emotionally, even at this stage of life. One thing that helps is redefining your role. Not as the always available parent, but as a whole person. A person who loves, yes, but also rests. A person who gives, yes, but also receives. A person who can say, "I need some space," without guilt. You didn't stop being a parent, but you also never stopped being you. Think about this. How many times have you said yes when your heart was saying no? Agreed to help even when your body was exhausted? Kept quiet when your soul needed to speak? These small betrayals of yourself add up. Over time, they become resentment. And that resentment shows up in your face, your voice, your spirit. But when you start saying no without apology, when you prioritize your needs with compassion, something powerful happens. You begin to feel lighter. You begin to feel like you again. And guess what? Your child may resist that at first. They might push back. They're used to the version of you who says yes no matter what. But that's okay. Their discomfort isn't your responsibility. Your peace is. There's a beautiful phrase I heard once. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. Think about that. If your child knows they can speak sharply and you'll still come running, why would they change? But if you calmly say, "I love you, but I won't engage when I'm being spoken to with disrespect," you draw a line in the sand, and not just for them, but for yourself. You show yourself that you are worthy of being treated well. And let me tell you something else. Your emotional health matters more than holding on to a toxic version of a relationship. You're allowed to step back from someone, even your child. If being close to them causes you pain, that doesn't mean you stopped loving them. It means you're learning to love yourself too. Now, I know that sounds radical to some people, especially if you come from a generation where parents were expected to give endlessly. But times have changed, and maybe one of the most loving things you can do for your child now is to stop enabling the dynamic where you are invisible. Let's talk about dignity for a moment. Because this isn't just about pain. It's about power. Quiet, respectful, internal power. The kind that doesn't scream, doesn't beg, doesn't demand. It simply stands. You have a right to feel peace in your own home. You have a right to be spoken to kindly. You have a right to spend your time how you wish. You're not just mom or dad. You're a human being who has lived a long, full life, and you still have chapters ahead. You deserve to fill those chapters with people who see you, who appreciate you, who meet you where you are, not just those who expect you to keep showing up no matter how you're treated. Now, some of you might be thinking, but what if I lose my relationship with my child completely? That fear is real, and I won't sugarcoat it. When you start setting boundaries, some relationships do shift. Some even break for a while. But I want to gently ask you, is what you currently have really a relationship? Or is it a habit of silence and suffering? Because sometimes we hold on to something not because it's good, but because we're afraid of the emptiness that comes without it. But that emptiness, that space, it can be sacred. It can be healing. It can become the place where you rediscover yourself, not as someone's parent, but as someone. So take a deep breath. You don't need to fix everything today. You don't need to confront anyone tonight. But you can start by noticing where your boundaries have faded. You can start by speaking more kindly to yourself in the quiet moments. You can start by remembering that you are not the sum total of your child's behavior. You are you, a whole person, a beautiful, complex, still evolving soul. You gave your child life, but your life, it still belongs to you, and it's never too late to reclaim it. There's something deeply empowering about remembering who you were before anyone called you mom or dad. Before the sleepless nights, the worry, the cooking, the rides to school, the endless giving. You had hopes, goals, things that made your eyes light up. And maybe along the way, as you built your family, those parts of you were placed on a shelf, carefully, lovingly, with the idea that you'd come back to them one day. But years pass and suddenly you realize you've been waiting for permission to return to yourself. I'm here to tell you, you don't need permission anymore. You can pick up those pieces now. You can walk toward yourself with the same devotion you once walked toward your children. You don't have to stop being a parent to start being whole. In fact, your wholeness may be exactly what your adult child needs to see. Not because they'll suddenly change, but because they'll finally see you clearly as more than just someone who exists to support them. One of the most surprising things I've heard from adult children is how much more they respect their parents when they see them living with dignity, saying no when needed and pursuing their own lives. It doesn't always happen right away. But over time, many children come to admire a parent who values themselves, not in a boastful way, but in a quiet, grounded way that says, I'm here and I matter. And let's be honest, it's not just about the child anymore. This stage of life, you've earned it. You've earned mornings that are peaceful, not filled with dread. You've earned relationships that lift you, not drain you. You've earned the right to stop proving your love and simply live it in whatever way feels right to you. Sometimes, the best thing you can do for a broken relationship is to step back and give it space to breathe. Not out of punishment, but out of love for yourself. Because staying close when it only brings pain isn't loyalty, it's self-neglect. And you've done enough of that in your life. There's no shame in protecting your peace. In fact, that's a form of wisdom that only age can teach us. When you stop reacting, stop explaining, stop chasing after crumbs of recognition, something miraculous happens. You begin to live in your own rhythm again. You find small joys that aren't dependent on someone else's mood or approval. You start to enjoy your own company again. That smile you used to have, it returns. Now you might still feel sadness. Of course you do. This kind of heartbreak, the kind where someone is alive but emotionally absent, is one of the hardest kinds to carry. But even grief softens when it's not tangled in guilt. When you know deep down that you've done your best, you start to let go of what you can't control. And here's a powerful truth. Even if your child never changes, you still win. Because you chose to love without losing yourself. You chose peace over performance. You chose to live instead of waiting. It's okay to let go of the fantasy that your child will suddenly wake up and say all the things you've longed to hear. Maybe they will. Maybe they won't. But your healing does not have to depend on that moment. Your life doesn't pause until someone else gives you permission to enjoy it again. Take walks that feed your soul. Laugh with friends who see you. Make art. Write letters. Plant a garden. Learn something new. You are not just aging. You are becoming. And you are still allowed to become something beautiful. If your child returns to you with softness, let that be a blessing, not a requirement. And if they don't, let that be their path, not your prison. We can love people and still release them. We can forgive people and still protect ourselves. Love doesn't mean staying in pain. It means holding compassion. For them, yes, but also for ourselves. So, as we close this chapter of our conversation today, let me remind you of something simple and sacred. Your story is not over. Your worth is not negotiable, and your peace is not optional. You are more than what your child sees. You are more than the gratitude they may or may not show. You are more than the silence, the distance, the disappointment. You are still here, and that is enough. You know, one of the most powerful questions you can ask yourself at this point in life is, who am I when no one is looking? Not who you are as a parent, not who you are in the eyes of your child, but who you are deep down when you strip away the expectations, the guilt, and the longing. Because the truth is, your life is still yours. Not because your child approves. Not because they notice, but because it always has been. For years, you may have felt like you were sitting in a waiting room, hoping for a change, a phone call, a sign of appreciation. But you don't have to sit there anymore. The door is open. You can walk out. You can choose to stop waiting and start living. You can say, I'm ready to live the years I have left in peace, with joy on my terms. That's not bitterness. That's bravery. And here's the most unexpected part. When you stop needing gratitude, you often begin to receive it. Not in dramatic moments, but in subtle shifts. Maybe your child starts to notice your calmness. Maybe they hear a new firmness in your voice. Maybe, just maybe, they begin to understand that you are no longer emotionally dependent on their response. You've stepped into your own light. That kind of shift can be deeply healing. But even if it doesn't happen, you're still whole. You're still worthy. You've reconnected with yourself in a way that's far more lasting than any thank you ever could be. So if today you're holding sadness, hold it gently. But don't let it define you. If you're feeling alone, reach out. Not just to your child, but to friends, to nature, to faith, to yourself. You are never too old to rediscover what it means to feel connected. Sometimes the connection we've been craving from others begins to blossom the moment we connect inward. Maybe no one ever told you this before, so let me say it now. You are not responsible for your adult child's behavior. You are not less of a parent because they don't see you right now. You are not too late to change how you live and how you love. You are allowed to be proud of the love you gave. Even if it wasn't received the way you hoped, you are allowed to carry that love forward into friendships, into community, into yourself. Because love like yours doesn't disappear. It just needs a new direction to flow. You've spent so many years pouring into others. Now is the time to pour into yourself. Make your days meaningful again. Not because someone else gives them meaning, but because you do. That can look like quiet mornings with a good book. It can be laughter with friends. It can be learning how to say no without guilt and yes to things that nourish your spirit. It can even be simply sitting in peace, knowing that you no longer need to chase validation to feel alive. And if someone watching this feels like giving up, please don't. You are needed. You are loved. You are valuable, whether your child says it or not. You are part of a generation that knows what it means to endure, to give, to stay when things are hard. Now you have a chance to teach something just as important. How to choose peace. How to set boundaries. How to live not from emptiness, but from wholeness. So take that step, no matter how small. Let it be the beginning of a new chapter, not defined by regret or resentment, but by clarity, dignity, and grace. And if this message spoke to you, I invite you to share your story in the comments. You'd be surprised how many people are walking this same path. Your voice could be the comfort someone else has been praying for. And don't forget to subscribe to Strong Elderly Life for more real, honest conversations just like this one. This channel is here for you, because we believe that wisdom doesn't fade with age. It shines brighter. Thank you for spending this time with me. May you walk forward from here with your head high, your heart steady, and your spirit full. Here's to living your best life at any age.